Welcome everyone to the Tuesday evening class of the Granite Family History Center. This evening we're pleased to have James Tanner present to us. His topic is the new Google gold mine for genealogy. There is a lot of information genealogy related that you can find in Google, and James is going to explain some techniques, resources and so forth for doing that. James is a well-known blogger, researcher and instructor. He does frequent presentations for Roots Tech, for the MyHeritage Company. He also instructs at the BYU Family History Library and is the chairman of the board of the Family History Guide Association. So he has his hands in a lot of great activities for family history. He also has produced a number of videos for the BYU Family History Library, as well as the Family History Guide Association. So we will turn the time over to James, and please note that this session will be recorded and will be available on the website within a few days. Thanks, and James, go ahead.
Okay, well, glad to be here. We're going to talk about Google and Google, the gold that's missing in Google. Of course, we're talking a little bit allegorically there about the knowledge and things that you can learn from Google. And I just kind of point out that if all you do is use Google to search for things, you're missing the boat, because Google has just developed a tremendous number of not only their own internal applications or apps and their own resources, but they have also amassed a huge number of partner programs and apps that work along with Google and Chrome, and understanding that Chrome is part of Google. So basically, you need to start with the list of the Google apps, and this is they're pretty easy to find. Every time you go to this Google page, you get the search bar here in front, but you also get the Google search. You can say, I'm feeling lucky. Of course, I'm feeling lucky. People wonder about that. They're afraid to click on that because they think it's gambling or something like that. But actually what it is that if you put in a search term and click I'm feeling lucky, they'll just find whatever they can about that search term. And if you don't put in a search term, they'll just kind of reread all of your Google searches, which they record, by the way, every last one of them, and then decide from that what you might want to look at. So those are the things. But what we're really looking at is this little icon up here in the corner, which is called a waffle icon. These icons actually have names, and that's one of them, and this one is the waffle icon. And when we click on that waffle icon, we get a drop-down menu that has a number of the of apps, and you have to scroll down through this list. There's quite a few more as you scroll down. Over the years, these apps have changed quite considerably. Some of them are what you call old standbys, like Maps and YouTubes and Gmail and News and things like that, and Contacts. But there's a lot of new ones, and some of the old ones that we used to use and we have to find some other way, or we have to, or they're no longer available. So Google does go through a lot of transitions, and a lot of this information, nothing has really lost, because usually they have something else that they replace that with. For example, they had a program which was called Hangouts, Google Hangouts, and now they have another program that's called Google Meet. So Hangouts is on the way out, and Meet is on the way in. So there's just a constant change. So this is an update of reviews that I've given many years in the past. They've quite a few years now since I've done this. Now, all the apps are a mixture of free and paywall apps. Now, when we talk about a paywall app, that's a term that's now being used. The paywall apps mean that you have some sort of cost involved. Very few programs, websites, apps that are available today are single pay. You get the program, and then you wait, and then they do an upgrade, and you buy a new upgrade. That whole scenario of doing programs has almost disappeared. Not quite. There's still a few programs out there, but basically today programs are based online. That means that they have their primary functions are all on the internet, and there may be a desktop form or part of that online app. So as you click on your desktop, it will connect to the internet, and you'll be working on the internet, and it'll be saving things to the internet, even though you are working off what you think's on your computer. You can also work on your computer with the downloaded apps when you're not connected to the internet, when you have no internet connection. But when you do that, then the documents are saved locally. When you do connect back to the internet, if you have it set up and if you have the right amount of storage and things like that, then what you've created will then be synchronized with the internet. It'll just simply back up what you have. That may happen automatically, or it may happen only when you instruct Google to do that. So there's different kinds of ways that these programs interact. And as you look at this screenshot, you'll see there's lots of third-party applications on this particular board. There's one that I use with some of the people that I interact with, and that's called Slack. And there's a Slack for Gmail, which means that you can send a Gmail to your Slack account. And there's some other things on the board here. These are things that are available under the long menu that you see just to the right of the icons. And they work with different kinds of programs that they have, and become kind of like accessories or add functionality to those programs. Emphasize that all of these apps work with the Chrome browser. If you're using another browser, if you're using a Macintosh Apple Macintosh computer, and you're using Safari, or if you're using Fire, any of the other programs that are out there, the browser programs, they are not going to work well or at all with the Google apps, because Chrome is Google's programs, and so Google is going to make the programs to work with Chrome and make the programs not to work so well with the other browsers. It's like an add-on value to having a Chrome account. There's really reasons when you begin to analyze all this as to why Google has virtually taken over a lot of the search functions of the internet, because they have created value and value-added apps and things that enhance your use and make you use your program, so that you're kind of tied into Google, which is not a bad thing. It may be disturbing to some, but not a bad thing. All of these apps are online. Emphasize that. Some of them can be used, and I'm going to repeat this that I just said a moment ago. Some of them can be used on your device, downloaded, but all of them can be used with almost any device that can run Google Chrome. So if you can get Google Chrome on your watch, or on your iPad, or on your tablet computer, or your desktop computer, or wherever you are, it's very possible, given bandwidth and connection and all that you can run these Google apps on that device, and they have functionality that's comparable across the entire device spectrum. Obviously, if you have you're trying to use an app on your wristwatch, you have like an Apple Watch or something, and you're trying to type on that, it's not going to work very well. But that's just, some people can do that. Me, I cannot type on little tiny keys. So I leave that for my desktop. And the caution down here on the bar is that memory speed and internet connection are always a consideration. No matter what you think you have on your computer for memory, if your computer is dated, meaning more than about 5 years old, or your device is dated, meaning more than about 5 years old, it's very likely with upgrades that are automatic, not only from the device and its operating system, but from Google and their operating and their programs and apps, that you're going to run out of memory, because the memory needs are always continuously expanding over the whole spectrum of products and devices. So the waffle icon has the basic free apps. Everything on the waffle icon is free. There's no hidden charges of whatsoever. The hidden charges from companies like Google and anyone else on the internet comes from being bombarded by sales offers and and enticements to purchase other programs or purchase more memory or do whatever through the Google program. And you can choose to ignore those. And like I said in the last slide, you can choose to ignore them only so long, because basically as you ignore them for over a long period of time, your particular device begins to lose functionality. It means fewer and fewer of the apps will run on your device because they simply are no longer supported by the operating system. If you try to preserve something out of the past, for example, I'm not going to upgrade my operating system because I know I can't, my device won't support it. So I want to keep the device. So I'm going to fight the system. The results of that are that you will end up having a device that can't connect to the internet at some point in time, or will have only sporadic connections, or may start losing data or crashing or doing all sorts of things that are undesirable. So this is not something that's insidious, that's some kind of a conspiracy or whatever. It's simply the fact that technology continues to increase, and one of the things that increases, things that increase always, are speed and the storage capacity of the different devices. For some idea, today, within the last week or so, Apple has released their new iPhone 13. So they have a new iPhone 13, and the iPhone 13 Max Pro is the highest volume of one of the new iPhones. It has an option to purchase a terabyte of internal memory in the phone. That's more than the entire storage capacity of the United States about the time they started the internet. So that's a lot of information and a lot of power. So we have to remember that. And the reason I'm talking about this as we get into the functionality of this is that as genealogists, whether or not we like the idea, we are tethered to this internet and technology system that we can't get away from, because we are basically a lot of the information, almost all the information that we have readily available, is available only through the internet to us. So here's some of the ones. I'm going to go through some of these apps that I think are helped with genealogical research and general computer use. Some of them are more useful for communicating and things like that. We do communicate as genealogists. I've been on Zoom most of this day that I'm giving this presentation, or listening to a Zoom broadcast, one or the other. And so this is something that we're kind of involved with. Yes, you will need to learn how to use the apps. It's an ongoing learning process. There's nothing with technology that doesn't require you to continually learn something new. When you're presented with a problem of organization or something that you need to do, for instance, when you do genealogical research, and as you do it over a period of time, if you're paper-based, traditionally in the past, you would accumulate huge piles of paper, literally. And I've been in some genealogists who have had whole rooms full of paper. And I have to be one of the ones that has a whole room full of paper. So basically, that kind of information is still there, but I'm generating it now and it's all going on digital. So it's really not taking up space in my home, which is fortunate for living space, but it is also challenging because there's always something new, even if it's just in the basic genealogy programs like Family Search or Ancestry or MyHeritage, Find My Past, or some of the other programs. They all have new features that require sort of a constant education process. And this is the truth of the apps. If you choose to use one of these apps or explore them, there are instructions, and I'll show you how to get to those instructions and what they do exactly right now, because here, this is one of the first Google apps that we're going to talk about. And this one, it relates directly to genealogy and to using and understanding the technology. YouTube has evolved. It has a lot of kind of shady and let's call it kind of weird stuff out there. But the core of YouTube is on how to do things. And the core of the how to do things extends to a tremendous amount of information out there about genealogy. The Family History Guide, which has been mentioned and is something that Bob Taylor, Bob Ives, and I are all involved in, is we are turning out videos as quickly as we can, and we have quite a number of them on our The Family History Guide YouTube channel. So if you go to the Family History Guide on YouTube, you will find a whole bunch of educational videos that are most of them are tied directly to the Family History Guide website. In addition, as mentioned, I work as a missionary at the BYU Family History Library, Brigham Young University Family History Library. And we are going on close to 600 videos made by a whole variety of people from the library, some of them professors at BYU and others who are experts, and like Bob Taylor, who have come in and done videos for us about the Family History Guide. So there are just an overwhelming number. So if you were, for example, to choose to learn one of these apps, and I pulled up one on Google Docs to start out with, the Docs program, and you can see here with tutorials, full tutorials. One of the things you want to look at when you look at YouTube is to look at when the video was uploaded. The closer to the present, the more useful it's going to be, because over time, all of this is going to change, as I was mentioning, and you're going to need to have something that's more current, because what you see on the screen when you open the app may not be the same if you're looking at a video that was made 2 or 3 or 5 years ago. So you look for something that's made within the last year or last few months, and that will give you the latest information about how the program works. And the videos can be stopped and rerun and stopped and rerun. And sometimes when I'm trying to follow specific instructions, I stop the video and then I'll even write down some of the things that I need to do. And then I'll start the video again, and then I'll type some of that in the computer. In other words, I'm using it as a set of instructions that runs along with me actually trying to accomplish what I'm trying to do. And I recently tried to get a function out of the computer that I knew would take me to the end of a long document. And I could not remember it, and I could not do it. And I looked it up like 3 or 4 times on YouTube, and I finally figured out how to do it and wrote it down, stuck it on my computer. And now I can use that almost. Now I remember it, and now I can use it consistently. So, you know, it's a process, and it's something that we have to learn. So now kind of hold on to your seats. We're going to get moving through a lot of information about a lot of apps. And it's fortunate that these videos are recorded because you can go back through them and pick up any of the information that you may have lost or not seen on the first view. So first of all, there are the bread and butter, sort of fancy bread there, basic production apps on Google. When computers were first begin to move into the home, when we got our home computers and when we got programs on our home computers, there were certain functions that became basic to the use of the computer and were just what made computers. In other words, you'd have had a hard time selling these machines if they hadn't ever developed these functions. But when they developed and had programs that could run on the computer that would let you type on the computer and see what you were typing and then correct it on the computer without having to erase or use tape or something over the typing and things like that. That was a deal changer. From then on, you were going to use that program, which was called the word processing program. And then when they got spreadsheet programs where you could have columns and add figures, and it was great for accountants. It was great for people who like to move numbers around. But all of a sudden, everyone figured out that they could do everything with this. They could keep roles in classes. They could work through, manage their gardens. They could keep track of their medications. They could do anything they could think of. They could put on a spreadsheet. And so this is just like, yeah. And then we got into presentations like these slides right here. Now I could say that these slides were done on a Google program, but they weren't. They were done on PowerPoint, which was a Microsoft program. But it's running on the computer, and it's using the Chrome application. So there we are. We're back to Google. And then there were some others. For instance, we need to keep track of things and keep reminders. And sometimes we like to fill or create a form for for people to sign up or to advertise or whatever. Okay, so there's kind of basic functions that the computer has evolved. Now, there are high-level, very sophisticated, extremely feature supported programs like the Microsoft, called Microsoft 365 now. This used to be Office 365, but now it's evolved. It's called Microsoft 365, and it has other apps involved and a whole bunch of other stuff. But the basics there are the Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, and they have the other programs for, they have OneNote, which is their note-taking program and their organizational program, and then others, including ones that would help you with forms. But what's happened there is that they're a subscription. They're behind a paywall. They cost hundreds of dollars a year for somebody to have that whole Office suite and run it on more than one computer. Like more than one device, and like your laptop and your desktop and your other computer and your kids' computers and whatever. So what happens? So Google has come out with these free apps that do most, not all, they're not as sophisticated, they're not as feature-filled, but they are functional and they are useful, and they are called Docs, and that's the word processing program. Sheets, which is the word processing the spreadsheet program, and Slides, which is the presentation program, and Keep, which is the note-taking program, and Forms, which is a form-making program. Now, if you need to have this, there's some reasons, and we'll move on to this. First of all, you can create, share, and collaborate with all of these. In other words, I can share a document on my computer, and my wife or my working person I'm working with, or somebody on a committee, they can all look at the same document. They can make changes, and everyone can have input to this document. That happens with Microsoft. That happens with Google. So this is the big deal, that you actually can put something up there that can be useful for documents. And so you create it in Google Sheets, and then you share it, and then invite people to be part of it, and then they can come on and put their information in, or they can add it. So what's useful for genealogists? Genealogists sometimes need to organize things, and these are helpful. But word processing, obviously, we're going to do that regardless of who we are and what process we're in, but genealogy. And as a genealogist, I do a lot of presentations. You may not do any presentations, but this is still something that's available. And the notes and list, I use the same kinds of programs to keep all of my, what you would call your research log for genealogists, if you are aware of that process. So you can use that to these and Word and the word processing program as a research log, and create your own forms if you want to. But you can just make them into use them on the word processing. Then the advantage is that you can share this information across the internet. It's already online. It's on the internet. It's being stored online, and so it's shareable. Someone who you don't have can look at it, and that helps you to go back and forth with people. Now today, when I was helping someone online do some research, the process was that they had put their information into a spreadsheet to try to figure out which of these people with the same name were their ancestors and which ones were the target ancestor. And the more information they accumulated in this spreadsheet, the more it became obvious who this ancestor probably was. And that was a valuable tool. But the important issue of that is that they were sharing that with me. I was giving them input into what they were doing. They were making changes. They were looking for sources. And then they would come back with a new setup of the spreadsheet and say, okay, here's all the additional information that I have added. Now, what do we think? So this is a way that as a teacher, as an instructor, as someone helping people, I can use these programs to help to make the instruction process possible, because travel time, distance, this person nowhere near close to me. They are at a distance, at least an hour's trip by car. And so that's just not going to happen very frequently, but we can jump on and talk about these things very quickly. Find out information, interview people, do all of the things that genealogists do. Now, where does all this information go? Well, it goes to a program called Google Drive. And Google Drive is a database program. It stores all of the kinds of documents that you want to put in it. Yes, you can put pictures in it. Yes, you could put anything else you want to in it. Now, the limitation, of course, is that you can store up to a certain amount of information, and then Google's going to ask you to pay for more storage. But it's reasonable, and it's reasonable storage. And so you can add on a lot of storage. And the advantage of this is you can share a document in Google Drive directly from Google Drive. So, for example, you can send out a notice to everybody that we have a Google Drive document, and it has the information that you need to know and where to go for your party. You don't have to duplicate it. You don't have to do anything. You have all of that information. You can also exchange information with people through Google Drive. Someone can post their information on Google Drive, share it with you, and then you can immediately see and respond to what they have. Now, if you're not in this process as a genealogist, if you're not involved in collaborating and sharing information and talking to people about the research that's going on, then you're missing out to a big component part of the research and genealogical process today, because that's where we are. That's what's going on. If one of my daughters finds something that is of interest to me in doing genealogical research, she can text me and we can talk, and then she can share the documents and show me the information directly. And the advantage also is that they're portable. So you can move into a different environment like the library and still have all of your information and all of your documents and all of your notes and everything. You know, the days where I watch, and I still see people trundling into the family history library with pulling suitcases full of documents and it's a tremendous waste of energy and time, because once you have all that information in your computer and organized and using these types of programs and creating folders for the things you want to have in folders, if that's the way you need to do your research and things. But if you've got your information there, then you can then put that information right back into your computer from where you're working in the library. Of course, it assumes that you'll be able to use a computer in the library, but most libraries today, many of the archives in most libraries will allow you to bring in a laptop or a tablet or whatever to do work on. So let's suppose you go to the library and you start finding documents. In my day, the only way I could get a copy of those documents was to go to the copy station, pay 25 cents. I used to take rolls of 25 cents a copy for each of the copies, and pile up my copies. After doing research for a few years at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, I had a pile of copies that was about 3 feet high. And that was what I had accumulated from the library. And then I put all of that information in the computer, and that 3 foot high pile of paper went away. So didn't have to keep that anymore. But what you may not be aware is that if you have a smartphone, then you can use another app called Google Photos, which is a Photos app that you can download on your devices and your smartphone and on your computer. It's online. So it's you go to Google Photos online, you will see all your photos. So you can take photos like this series of photos taken in an archive. And then when you get home, you open up your desktop computer, you open up Google Photos, and you have all the documents on your desktop. You don't have to copy them. You don't have to download them. You don't have to carry around a flash drive. You don't have to do any of that stuff. All you do is use your phone to take the pictures, and you have the information. Now, if that isn't good enough, you could scan it, obviously scan the document and put it on a flash drive and then take it home. But that's another device and another step, and it's not necessary anymore. And it's done through a program called Google Photos, because that's where you're going to store your photos. And there are other devices. I always have to admit there are other websites that allow you to store photos. Google lets you store quite a few photos for free. And then again, if you start getting a huge number like 10,000, you'll probably end up having to buy additional memory. Now, I would guess that this should be, if it isn't, the most used app for genealogy is Google Maps. I routinely look up every place that I hear about in the course of doing research on a map and look and see where it is so that I can visualize and understand where these people lived and how reasonable it would be for them to have married someone who lived in a different place. And Google Maps will tell me how far it is, walking time or driving time, from where my ancestors were, events in my ancestors' lives occurred. So there I am working away on anything, and I'm using Google Maps almost constantly. And then I can use the Street View function, which I haven't illustrated here, but that will take me down to the street so that I can see. And one of the things that I do constantly here is, especially when I'm doing research in Latin America for helping people, is to look for the churches in the area. So I will get a place where the person was born, and then I'll say, well, here's all the churches. So search these churches for records for this person. And that's the process that we go through. But if you do this and you use the Maps program consistently as you do your research, you'll find out that your research is assisted, but you'll also find out you're being much more accurate in the decisions that you make about how far or where these people might have lived or who they might have married. So here, oh, I did put in a thing from Street View. So here's one straight out of Street View. This is the quality. This is what you get when you look at the Street View. You'll be able to see the churches. You'll be able to see right down to the street with the people and see all the places. So if you want to see where your ancestors were born and you know the little town, then go in and drive around the little town using Street View, and you'll be able to see all of the places. That gives me a really good idea of what I'm looking for. Is the place small? Is it big? Is it a big city? Do we have to worry about different parishes and different parts of the city, this kind of thing? And so it just is a way to visualize. I'm very visual, and I need to see this kind of thing to do research. So here we can visit the places where your ancestors lived. This actually is a picture where my ancestors lived. This is a little town in northern Arizona called Joseph City. And this is where the Tanner family came when they came to Arizona, and as pioneers. And right down this street is where they settled. And this is the town where my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother and their children and all of their and some of their descendants lived. And eventually everybody moved away, and I don't know if there are any Tanners living there anymore. I doubt it, but it's a very small town. But it's interesting to be able to see this as it looks relatively recently. So what it would look like if you were to drive there. The let's say grown-up version of Google Maps is Google Earth. It has some of the same functions, but what Google Earth adds to the apps. Now, where would you find these? It's simple. Type in Google Earth in a Google search, and you will go right to the app. Type in Google Drive, and you'll go right to the app. Type in Google Maps, and you'll go right to the app. Google will put their stuff first. So you'll see that as the first or second thing that happens when you do a search on this. So knowing a URL is not necessary. It's just as fast to type Google space Earth and do a search as it is to type in a URL, and you'll come up with the programs. Okay, so this is Google Earth, and it's kind of like the grown-up version of Maps because it contains every kind of information that is conceivable about the Earth. It shows wildfires, it shows tornadoes, it shows earthquakes, it shows storms, it shows populations, it shows cities, it gives you the street view, it gives you the satellite views, it gives you demographic information, it gives you cultural information, social information, photographs of places that don't have Google Street View. It's just a tremendously full-featured program for free. At one point in time, there was a Google Earth Pro version that costs some money, but now the whole thing is free, and it's Google Earth, and it is totally available. The next program or app that I want to highlight is Google Translate. And if you go back far enough, it's very possible that you may run into records that are not in the language that you speak. And so you might need to change. And here is almost 100 different languages from translate between any two of 100 different languages. So in this case, we're translating this Dutch record that I copied into an English record on the right-hand side. And it just goes blink and it translates it. Now the question is this a good translation? The answer is it's an adequate translation. It is certainly enough that what I need to know to do genealogy. It may not be enough to write a poem or a sonnet or anything, but it is basically a bread and butter type of translation. There's very little that it doesn't translate because it's an artificial intelligence program that will add translations if you give it an extra translation. So it continues to add translations as it does, and it becomes better and better at it. So you're going to get just about everything you need out of translating documents, other than reading the handwriting right now, which is still a little bit in the future. Now, Google Books, we need to get to that because Google Books is just a gold mine. Google once set out to digitize all the books in the world. They may still be trying to do that. They went through a long series of lawsuits, which were very much publicized, which they won when they got to the Supreme Court, which finally ruled in Google's favor. And they can still go ahead and do what they're doing of creating this huge digital library. And if you search for genealogy, you will find hundreds of thousands of genealogy books. And the more specifically you try to, it's a good idea to put your family names and all of the people you're looking for into a Google search anyway, because it may turn up a book, it may turn up anything about that person that you may not know. Now, emphasize again, not all of the apps are in the waffle. There's some apps outside. This one is outside the apps, but it's a very useful and interesting one. This one's called Google Scholar. And what Google Scholar does, it will search all the scholarly literature from one convenient place. So it's searching journal articles. These are academic journal articles, professional journal articles of all different kinds. And you're saying, well, how do you know if my person's going to end up there? You never know. This is just another place to look. But there is one more part of it. You can explore all the works and it will provide you with the citations and the authors and the publications. And then you can locate the complete document through your library or on the web. and you can keep up with research and everything else. But there's another thing this program does. It has, what kinds of things you could find when you do this. Here's one of them, Getting Started in Genealogy by William Dollarhide. And it is a book from Googles.com. And this is scholarly. And here's a Swiss American deep ancestry into genetic genealogy, which you may be interested in, by someone who wrote in the Swiss American Historical Society Review. And then there are related articles. So you just basically it's a way to get into the academic and more I don't know how to characterize it other than saying that part of the world that is also interested in genealogy and has done some very extensive research which may touch on your particular interests or your particular lines. So it's not a place to search for names and dates, and it's called scholar.google.com if you want it for quickly. But Google Scholar has another aspect, which is the same program, and that is it also has case law. And so you can select the court you want to search. There's a list of all the courts of record. These are called courts of record. There's trial courts are courts that are not of record, meaning the judge makes a decision in the case, but they don't write an opinion as to why they decided the way they did. These are appellate courts across all of the states in the United States and the federal court system of all the circuit courts, as well as the Supreme Court. Every case that's available is here for free on Google. So you can then go and do a search for names, see if your ancestors were in a lawsuit. You can search one state, you can search the entire country. So for instance, I throw in my name. Of course, I was a trial attorney, so I should show up here, and I did. Here I am, representing a client in the Arizona Court of Appeals. And then there's someone who is related to me, perhaps, who is in the Supreme Court, which may or may not be related to me. And the next one is someone who is in Texas and probably not related to me. But then there's another one down there that I appeared again in the Arizona Court of Appeals. So these are, this is a way to find individuals and information because people are going to show up as defendants and plaintiffs in lawsuits, and they may very well have appealed. And so you want to do and look and see if that's possible. And here's your attorneys pay for these kinds of databases a lot of money every month, and we have it for free on Google from Google Scholar. The Google Workspace. This is called the Workspace Marketplace. This is their latest term for this, and instead of the store or whatever. And this has all of these extra add-on apps that I had a screenshot of earlier. Some of these are, as I mentioned, very much paywalls. And for instance, here we have the Adobe Creative Cloud, which is quite expensive, but worth subscribing to the Adobe programs. So these are things that add on to your Google and Chrome programs, but are already other programs that you may have to pay money for. So it's a place for exploration. If you go in there, explore, you may just very well find some solution to some problem that you have. I mean, how to keep track of all your research, where to go, how do I keep track of all these sources and all of the stuff that I've done, where are all these places? You may very well find one of these programs to be valuable in doing that kind of research. Okay, well, there are always something. We could go on for quite a while and just keep multiplying, but I think we've covered quite a few programs, and we'll take any questions if there are any left.
I'd just like to say thank you to James for that wonderful presentation. There are so many aspects to Google, and it literally is a goldmine, not just for the familiar Google searches, but for the multitude of apps and how they play into different operating systems and so forth, all the connections, especially for genealogists. Wonderful information. Elaine, any questions?
I'll stop sharing.
On quiet group.
Okay, well, thank you this evening for attending, and we want to draw your attention to next week. Every Tuesday night we have classes. So next week we're going to have Michelle Karen presenting on capturing and preserving memories with your phone. That should be pretty good. She's presented at the BYU Family History Library and has a lot of experience with social media, phones, memories, and so forth. So mark your calendars for next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Thanks for coming this evening, and we wish you a pleasant evening. And thanks again to James.
See ya.